Hi, I'm Corey Poirier, and I'm about to have a productive conversation with Mike Vardy.
Welcome to A Productive Conversation. I'm Mike Vardy. We've got a very special episode for you today. It is a combined episode featuring my conversation with Corey Poirier from May of 2017. That's going to come up at the tail end of the episode. But because Corey has a new book that has just come out, The Enlightened Passenger, The Flight That Changes Everything, we felt it was timely to get him back on the show for a brief bit to talk about his new book and just have a conversation around it. It's a very short read. You'll hear my thoughts on it as we wrap up the episode, some of my feelings around, the way it's presented, how it unfolded for me. Again, it's written in a parable style. We get into that during our conversation as well as so many other things. And then we dive into the archives for my conversation with Corey that took place, 7 years ago, a little over 7 years ago. So again, thanks so much for taking the time to join me on this episode. And here it is, a two-part productive conversation with Corey Poirier. Enjoy. Corey, thanks so much for joining me again for a kind of a double episode of the podcast, if you will. If you're listening to this, you will get to hear our original conversation. So you get to do this comparison of like, where was Corey when we last chatted versus where he is now. And where he is right now is on the verge of, as we're recording this, releasing his book, The Enlightened Passenger, The Flight That Changes Everything. Corey, thanks so much for taking the time to join me for a bit today.
I'm super stoked, Mike. I've been looking forward to this all day. I had a full day, but I saw this coming up and I was looking forward to it.
Well, it's been, again, anytime that fellow Canadians can talk to one another, I think it's always good on the podcasting realm, right? So, all right. So, the book, it is number one for those that don't know. It is a short read, but an insightful one because of the way that you've kind of constructed it in this parable/fable style. Very much in the vein of with Josh Kaufman would be a good example, how to fight a Hydra. And of course, The Greatest Salesman in the World, which if you've read Matthew McConaughey's book, Green Lights, he was heavily inspired by O.G. Mandino's book. The Richest Man in Babylon, the One Man, like there's so, The Alchemist, The Go-Giver. I mean, and we're seeing like, there's something about writing a book that way. I think that carries the message in a different manner. What was your impetus behind saying, I want to write this book? This is the message I want to send, and I need to do it in this fashion.
So, I mean, it's such a great question. And I have to say, since you mentioned, not that I know him well, Og Mandino, I call him Og, and I think I was told that it was because he was Augie was his name.
I always go, whenever I see like OG, I'm like OG, like the original gangster. No, but
yeah, he was kind of the original gangster of parables in a lot of ways. I mean, not the first, but one of the originals. But yeah, so for me, honestly, a big part of it was actually his writing. So I was reading, immersed in, so some of the books that changed my life were The Alchemist, Celestine Prophecy, The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari, which is another parable, The 1 Minute Manager, The Go-Giver. But Og Mandino's writing hit me in a different way.
Right.
And so I will add this for those that are listening that want to write a book. Something I did, Mike, that nobody's ever told me that they did this. So I just it just occurred to me that it made sense. But what I did was when I was writing this book, because it was of that vein, those are the only books I read at the time.
Gotcha.
So I immersed myself. And the idea I had there is I wanted to write in a parable style and I wanted it to feel authentic, but also Og Mandino inspired me. So I wanted to kind of feel like that style of writing because, Think and Grow Rich and How to Win Friends were two books that changed my life. They're both written in 1937. So if you're writing a book today, it's probably not going to sound like that unless you intentionally do that. And so there was an intentional aspect of me being inspired by those books and trying to write in that style. Obviously, the important part to me was not to pick up anything along the way that would be, taking off of their credibility or creativity or their artistic approach, but it was just getting my head in that kind of space. And then, so in terms of writing a fictional parable, quite honestly, I knew what I wanted the beginning and the end to be when I started. I had the idea for like a year. And just in that year, it just kept coming to me that the best way to do it would be through fictional characters.
Right.
And like I said, I was reading a lot of parable at the time. And one of the things that a lot of people that haven't read those books or maybe read them and don't know this wouldn't maybe realize is most of those books we just mentioned, are loosely based on the author's lives.
Right.
The Celestine was based on James's life. Um, Obviously, Augmendino wrote The Greatest Salesman in the World. Obviously, he wasn't living in the time of Bethlehem, but it was loosely based on his life as a salesperson and working with other people and mentors he had. And so when you go and read into these things, a lot of them were loosely based on real life. And so was my book. So much so that I've since said that both characters, it took me a bit after I wrote it to realize this, how much so it was true. Both characters are really half of me. So each character is half of me. So Robert, the young character, is me when I was younger, and Tramp is hopefully where I'm getting closer to now. But even the stories shared, most of them actually really happened to me. They're not fictional stories, but the characters are fictional and the setting is fictional. So that was a long answer to your question, Mike, but that was kind of what inspired it. Is I came up with this idea based on a question I asked often. I don't want to say what that is because it gives away a big twist in the book, but I'll say I came up with the idea from that, and then I sat with it for a year. I sat on it for a year, didn't do anything other than go, oh, you know what would be cool, and nothing with it. Like I'd write little notes. And then I started writing on a vacation. I wrote half the book in 2 weeks and then sat on it again. And it took the rest of 50 weeks to finish the second half.
Wow.
And then it was another year until you're holding it in your hand right now. So it was actually 3 years from idea to holding a printed copy in one's hands. But yeah, the idea came from just me reading a lot of parables at the time and feeling this story had to be shared through a parable.
Well, I was watching a video, I'll put in the show notes, Pedro Pascal, like the 10 essentials that he carries around, like those 10 essential videos. And one of the things he says, because he's reading a book, and he brings a book with him, and he says, the truth is in fiction. Like that was something he said, the truth, I think, is in fiction. And I'm like, there is, I mean, we are seeing, I mean, I've interviewed my fair share of guests that have introduced this storytelling parable style to their books, because there's a lot of business books out there, and you know, whether it's personal development, straight up entrepreneurial business, what have you, that have, I wouldn't say become rote, but there is a formula that kind of they follow, which is like, here's some, you know, here's some empirical stuff and here's an anecdote, here's some empirical stuff, and so they kind of oscillate between those. When you get into this idea of the parable style, and you talk about, like, again, there's no question that Mandino's impact has been affected, because there's, like, you know, here's a lesson you should take, like, here's some takeaways. So it's not like you're not infusing elements of that in. But I think one of the things that people should understand about when you're reading a book like this is, I think the shortness of it matters too, because you know, I just finished reading the book Smart Brevity, and I'm reading some of Han's work. He's a philosopher that, you know, and I'm sure I'll link to it in the show notes as well. I would butcher his first name, but very short reads about very specific topics. And there seems to be this push towards shorter, which, I mean, I think is the way that our reading has shifted towards. So did you find that when you were writing it, that it just lent itself to kind of brevity in and of itself? Or did you find yourself like, I've got to cut a bunch of stuff here that is like, this is way bigger than it needs to be, and I need to compact it a little bit?
So definitely more of the former. I actually, whenever I wrote it, and this is, I can't say this is every time I've written, it's been like this, but this book, it felt finished, meaning like the length hasn't changed much, and it felt finished when I finished writing it at the length it's pretty much at now. I'll go one step further. So didn't have to subtract much in the way of meat. We, you know, obviously edited out things that just didn't flow anymore with it.
Sure.
But what's interesting is that I got a beta group to review it, basically. So James Redfield, who wrote Celestine, told me that, you know, he had 50 people read Celestine for 2 years. And he kept saying to them, like, I'm impressed they kept doing it. But he said, I want to know when you put it down. And he wouldn't stop writing and changing things until every person on that 50-person list said they couldn't put it down. Because they said, well, I put it down for supper. He said, I don't care. I want this to be the book you miss your supper for.
Right.
And I thought that I like the idea of the beta group. I mean, that's why they spend how much money making these big movies, but they always have a beta group watch it, or a focus group, or what have you, and share the thoughts. And so I did the same with the book. And I will tell you, the common theme that kept coming back from people, which still to this minute surprises me, was, I'll say, other than grammar, that's, you know, take grammar off the table, because that's a different conversation.
Yes.
But other than the grammar issues, and other than people saying, oh, did you think about doing this? And it would be like, just like, did you think about mentioning the Grand Canyon when he's flying over? You know, like just little things. But other than a few little suggestions, almost every person to a fault uh, said it's ready, which blew my mind. Like this is the first draft. And
Mhm.
I said, look, or the grammar. I got somebody to edit it, but I knew even that, like it was a quick edit. I knew it wasn't going to catch all the stuff.
Yeah.
So I had a couple of the teacher people who said they wouldn't pay attention to grammar, send me a list of 80 things I needed to change when the
Mhm.
grammar. But what I told them, I learned this at a writer's retreat last year, and I'm going back in a couple of weeks to the same writer's retreat. But a guy named Richard Paul Evans, who actually wrote the foreword,
Yes.
he's a 46-time New York Times bestselling author. His biggest book was The Christmas Box. And at that event, one of the people that he works with said, when you're sending it out to people to get their feedback, ask them basically, roughly the questions were, what I want to know is what made you laugh when you read the book? What made you cry? What confused you? I think was what shocked you, and I forget what the fifth one was. What made you feel, or whatever.
Right.
The big thing is to say, but ignore the grammar, please. And you know yourself, you're still going to get the grammar stuff. But that's what I asked, and I got people saying I cried at this point. I laughed, or I didn't cry at all. But this, really struck me. I got all those things, but again, the common theme was she's ready. I want to be able to buy this book in a store now.
Wow.
And I thought, wow, that this book must have been channeled through me, because anything else I've written, I've always been told you have to write a crappy book before you can turn it into a good book.
Yeah.
I'm not the judge of my own book, but I will say I was blown away by the fact that it was closer to finish than anything else I've ever written at the time.
That's amazing. Last question before we move, before I let you go, because I know as we're recording this, you're in the middle of the launch. And it'll be interesting for those that are listening that are like, hey, like stick around, because we have the previous conversation we had, just to see, like, it's always nice to see like what's shifted in the time since we last spoke. When you go through the book, and again, no spoilers, there's 15 chapters. Which was the one of those that shocked you that came out? Like, so I'll throw that question back at you. Like, as you were writing, you're like, oh, like either shocked you or pleasantly surprised you as to how it unfolded.
Well, I mean, and it's interesting because it depends too if we're talking the lessons that are delivered in the book or the actual story.
Hmm.
And so the lessons, what I did do, I will say, Mike, and I didn't have to change many, but I did remove a couple lessons and switch a couple around, because I kept asking myself, if I could only share 10 lessons with my kids and I was in a room and I had 24 hours to share them, what are the 10 ones I'd share?
Right.
And I think I got like 7 right off the jump
Hmm.
that were the they're going to share. And then I might have replaced 3 with 3 more. But what I will say, I guess a couple of lessons that came out that kind of surprised me to come out in a fictional type format like this.
Hmm.
One was it relates completely to productivity, which I talked about in the book, is the power of no.
Yeah.
And how I've interviewed, as you know, like thousands. I mean, it's right now it's about 7,500 thought leaders. So this is a pretty good research pool to pull from.
Hmm.
And what I've noticed is most thought leaders say no 20 to 50 times more than the average person.
Right.
So understanding the power of no, but then in the book, I followed it up with why you should write a personal mission statement and how what's on that statement will help you decide a yes and a no. So the power of no coming out in this type of book kind of surprised me. That
Hmm.
was kind of a feel for me. Another thing that worked its way into the book, I think it was like after, it might have been like when we were editing, but I heard it on Everybody Loves Raymond,
Okay.
and Robert, the brother, said he talked about the mayfly, and he said about 24 hours. I'm like, what's that all about? Because he made a comment and is like, I can't remember what he said, was something like, I can't believe I'm living my life this way. What if I was the mayfly or something? And I'm like, what's that all about? So I Googled it, and I didn't know until we put it in the book that the mayfly lives 24 hours.
Yep.
Now, interestingly, that's the male mayfly. What a lot of people don't know is the female lives 3 to 5 minutes. So her whole life is just to make more mayflies. But in the book, I brought that in from the perspective of, if you were the mayfly and you had those 24 hours, knowing everything you know now, and you had 24 hours left, what would you do that day?
Hmm.
And in the book, Treb asked Robert that question. But then when Robert gives him the answer, he follows up, well, then my question, Robert, is why aren't you living that way now?
Yeah.
And I think it's an important reflection. But I guess what I'm getting at is I didn't anticipate when I started writing this book ever that a mayfly would be the head of a chapter. It's not just in the book,
No,
it's the name.
yeah, yeah. Well, and I think, to your point, this, and what this style lends to, is this unfolding of lessons, the receptiveness. It's kind of like, and I've talked about this before when doing comedy. Like, the reason that comedy can teach you lessons is because you're so disarmed in those moments, right? Whereas if you sit down to read like a book that's very practical and tactical, and and it's not wound in fiction per se, it you're almost expecting to get it, and you may even be able to telegraph how that's going to come at you. You're like, oh, I've heard this way before, or yeah, I know that I'm supposed to say no, or yeah, I know that live like you're dying, like all that stuff. But when it's wrapped in fiction, that I mean, those are the powerful. I mean, again, watching like the movie The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, or reading James Thurber's like original text. All of those, what was it? The Shawshank Redemption. My son and I watched it the other day. Like, there, get busy living or get busy dying, right? Like, or like all of those lessons, they're underpinnings of this, like within the story, and you are far more receptive to them in that kind of modality, I think, than if you
Mm.
are just reading it from like, okay, how to be enlightened, like, okay, tell me how to be enlightened, but if you're putting it inside of a story or a different kind of wrapper, that's where the delight factor can come in.
Well, I will say, to kind of add on to your question and the answer around that, I think what also surprised me is how many layers revealed themselves to me after I'd written it, because I was in it.
Mm,
And so I didn't realize that I was really writing my journey, like those two characters. Also, I didn't realize, by making Robert a spiritual skeptic, and it's not a hugely spiritual book, but
no.
just the components, like talking with synchronicity and is this a thing? Well, Robert's like, yeah, that's just coincidence. And so that was me. I
Yeah.
was the spirit skeptic. So that part, kind of, I guess, for me, kind of surprised me how much I worked that into it. But it was unintentional. But I feel like it was something I wish I would have done intentionally, because I want to reach the people that the spiritual gurus don't reach.
Right.
The people that are already into this, bought the movie The Secret, and we're already in, they're not learning anything new.
No.
But how are we reaching that truck driver that might be able to start creating abundance in his life? And so that was one thing. Another thing, which I didn't really share much in general with promoting the book, talking about the book, anything, was the Enlightened Passenger component. That name was really designed to be layers thick, meaning like it's an enigma within a riddle. For
Mhm.
example, is Robert the enlightened passenger because he's becoming more enlightened on the journey? Is Treb the enlightened? Now, I would say most people grab the book, their immediate reaction is Treb's the enlightened passenger.
Right.
But what I'm saying is, it could be Robert, it could be Treb, or are you the reader, the passenger in the book? Are you the enlightened passenger?
Yep.
Or you give it to somebody else. Are you now the enlightened passenger because you give it to them, or are they the enlightened passenger because they read it?
Yep.
What I'm getting at is that I wanted that part to be ambiguous. And so it's a lot of layers to this book, I think, that people wouldn't see on the outside looking in. Like, it wasn't just set from, let's just write this and put it out to the world. Like, it's meant to be layers. And I don't want to give anything away because there is some surprises in the book.
Yep.
I will say, I don't. Did you read to the end yet?
I haven't gotten to the end yet. No, it just arrived yesterday. I've started to go through it pretty. I mean, it is not, let's put it this way, for those that are, looking to pick it up, again, it's not a long book, but also I mean, it's definitely a book that if you're going to read it, you want to be in a place where you can read it. It's not a skimmer. It's none of, because it's a story. And, as you go through it, and we talked a little bit about the beginning and so on and so forth before we hit record, but, um, no, I haven't gotten all the way through it yet, but that's not to say that I could sit and, I mean, I could go through this. Each chapter is short. It's just a matter of, I would recommend, like I did with Mandino's book, like I did with The Go Giver, the pause in between each chapter. I think it's almost like if you were the passenger on the plane, you have to go to the restroom every single time you're done a chapter, because that way you have time to kind of ruminate on it a bit, right?
Yeah, I love that. And I'll say, the reason I asked you that question, and I'll leave it with this much about it. I'll say you'll understand what I mean
Yeah.
soon, how many layers there is to this book.
Well, and truth be told, by the time we're releasing this episode, I will have read it. So wait till the end of the episode as you're listening to this right now, and you'll hear kind of my response to what Corey's saying. So that way, number one, I mean, I'll be able to give a more telling endorsement of the book. But number two, it just, you'll see where the layers are, and I'll be able to, again, no spoilers. So the book is called The Enlightened Passenger, The Flight That Changes Everything. Corey, thanks so much for taking the time to join me here today. Now, by the time this comes out, the book will be out. So where can people pick up the book, and where can people keep up with the work that you're doing?
So I think it depends on when they get it, in the sense that, honestly, you can obviously get it on your main channels, retailers, what have you. I will say, depending on when they're listening, they actually can go to the site that we've set up for the book. And when you go there, the difference and benefit to that, Mike, and it's part of us trying to do a pre-order launch, and then it'll continue probably for a month or two into the official launch, is that you actually get 5 instant bonuses when you grab it that way. So the cool part is on the site, it sends you to the retailer link. So you pay no more. You go to the same place. You just come back and put in the order number, and that way we can deliver the bonuses to you. So there's 5 bonuses you get automatically, and there's some extra bonuses depending on when you pick up the book. So again, I know this is evergreen, so I'm talking from both perspectives. But one of the things we're going to be doing in probably, I'm going to say August of 2024, just to timestamp it, is we're going to be doing 2 separate book club nights. And I'm already working on, I can't say names yet, but really, really, really big names. 2 of them I'm talking to, I've never interviewed before. One is 100 books out. One was in The Secret on Oprah. And so we're planning to do a really big, I'm going to call it kickoff type thing. But the idea behind the book club is that, as you know, a lot of people don't make it past chapter 1. So we're wanting to basically incentivize you to show up having read the book, and we'll put you in breakout rooms and people discuss what they learned. But yeah, so we're going to have a lot of cool things coming up. And the best way into that book club is when you grab the book, it actually sends you a link and you just sign up to be on the waiting list. But that's some of the things we're doing on the back end. So if you go to thisisthebook.com, basically you grab your copy there, put in your order number, and you'll literally get 5 bonuses right away. And then you'll get a few other bonuses that are still to come. And I think, I don't know, you never know. Sometimes when you're running a launch, 6 months later, the site could be doing nothing. But my hope is to have some bonus so that always it'll make sense for you to get it through there.
Gotcha.
So either way, we're not selling it to you directly. Either way, you're still getting it off the retailer.
Perfect. Well, this episode won't be coming out too much after the episode, the book launches. It's scheduled to come out as of this recording, the 26th of June. So it's still fairly early in the process, which is good. So again, and where can people keep up with the work you're doing as well? If like on social and so on and so forth, can they keep up with you in that manner as well?
Yeah, and I will say, when you just said that date, Mike, the actual pub date, as we call it in the industry, June 25th.
There you go.
Literally, that's so the cool part is for your listeners, as they're listening right now in real time, just so they know, the book can be shipped to you right when you buy it.
There you go.
That's a unique thing, because today, if somebody gets it, they have to wait till June 25th. If your listener buys it, they already can get it. As far as following me on social, I guess I'm most active on Facebook and LinkedIn. And honestly, the easy way to find me usually is That Speaker Guy. So if you type in like That Speaker Guy on Instagram, I come up. If you type it in on LinkedIn, I'm pretty sure I come up. But either way, my name, spelling of my name, Corey, Corey, Poirier, Poirier. If you spell that into any of those platforms, there's not many of us, so you'll find me. Or if you Google me, you'll find me that way. So I don't think there's many Corey Poiriers that spell it the exact same way as me. So you should be good to go.
Corey, thanks so much for taking the time to join me at the beginning of our episode from the vault. And now check out the rest of our conversation, our previous conversation. We'll get into that right now. So, Corey, you are no stranger to being in an interview setting, but you're normally on the other side of the microphone, right?
Yeah, I it's funny because I would say that I've done a lot of media on this side of the microphone, but it probably numbers wise, it still be a long time before I ever catch the other side.
So basically what we're going to talk about today is just the idea of, I'm a speaker. I do quite a bit of speaking, not as much as you do, but I do my fair share. And I want to talk about the power of speaking and what that can do in terms of, delivering, and delivering enough, like the knowledge, insights, wisdom, things like that. And I mean, wisdom is probably not the best word, but getting to the point where it pushes people and propels them to action. First off, what brought you to the world of speaking? Because I think the journey to that is different for every single person that ends up taking the stage to speak.
Yeah, interestingly enough, I maybe be able to make the argument that my journey was as unique as you can possibly get, in the sense that it definitely isn't the traditional, I'm going to say, introduction. So what happened for me is that I had only spoken in front of an audience like less than a handful of times until 2002. And previous to that time, I was in sales. So I actually had a lot of experience speaking, obviously one-on-one and sometimes one-on-two or three in a meeting type setting, but it was very limited. And I had a small business when I was 19, and I got invited to speak on difficulties young entrepreneurs face. But I essentially delivered, but I turned different colors. I don't remember a word I said. And people came up afterwards and said, loved your talk. You were so passionate. And I said, well, what did you like about the talk? You know, what did you take away? And they said, I don't even know. When you're up there, I wasn't even sure what you're saying. You were going in so many different directions, but you were passionate. And I liked that. And it inspired me. So it was, it was an eye opener, but I also was still so terrified of it that I just kind of left it be where it was. And so here's where the journey for me was kind of a unique one, is in 2002, I was invited to try my hand at stand-up comedy. I went through a workshop, and third week of the workshop, we were invited to a comedy club. The idea is we were going to watch people perform stand-up in front of us, and we found out literally 5 minutes to showtime that we were actually the comics. So the guy kind of set us up. And so we 15 were there, 8 disappeared, like literally walked out the front door. Of the 7 left, I made the foolish mistake, or maybe wise mistake, to go up first, because I had been to a Toastmasters meeting, one in my life. And I learned that if you're going to face a fear, you should go up first, especially if you're like speaking. So I jumped up on the stage while the other comics were literally still debating who's going to go up first, and then grabbed the mic, told my first joke, told my second joke, only to find out that the mic wasn't actually turned on. Oh. So I was obviously greeted with a lot of silence. And that was kind of my, I'm going to say, forced way into the world of speaking, because I actually performed that night once we figured out the mic wasn't turned on, and then I kept going back week after week, and ultimately I ended up performing over 9 years. I performed 700 shows, but in the early stages of that, probably in the first year, I realized pretty quickly there were parts of comedy I loved, and there were parts I really didn't care for so much. And all of a sudden I saw Tony Robbins again after seeing him years earlier, and went, is this possible that this guy is getting paid to do this? Can you earn a living at this? Because I always thought he was just doing it, used to have the infomercials on TV, and I thought he was just doing it to sell his product. I didn't even think he got paid ever to speak. I just thought it was the product that made the money for him. And so once I discovered that and realized it had all of the things I liked about comedy and pretty well none of the ones that I didn't, I started dabbling in and made the transition over to first training, and then I evolved the two. So the comedy and the training I found in the middle was speaking, and I evolved into the speaking side. But why I say it was such a unique journey is almost any keynote speaker I've chatted with, and we're talking thousands I've just shared the bill with alone, I haven't run into one yet that started being a business person but found their way into speaking through comedy, through stand-up.
You found the first just now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that I actually started, and listeners of the podcast know that my background was comedy, doing sketch and stand-up and things like that. And my goal was to try to, and eventually what happened was I was trying to be more productive, and I started this productivity parody site. I was satirizing. I was trying to do like a Stephen Colbert version of it. And what happened is by taking that comedic spin to productivity, it ended up getting me to the point where I was actually able to speak about it legitimately. Because when you want to satirize something, and there's that old saying, there's truth in comedy, right? So I ended up finding my way back to the stage, speaking, trying to make time management and productivity entertaining. So it's interesting because as you're telling the story, I'm like, it's familiar. You did way more stand-up gigs than I ever did. I didn't do that many. I did a lot of comedy performances like sketch and improv, but not as many stand-up performances. But I think, let me ask you, the two things I could tell you, there's two things about the comedy life that I did not enjoy. Number one was the road life, like going on the road and traveling. And number two was the remuneration, the pay that you would receive. I can't tell you how many times that it was like, when I would do it, it's like nachos and beer, like, or pass the hat kind of thing, or a small pittance. Was that some of the things that pushed you away from it as well?
Well, and I should mention too, just while I'm thinking of it, but I'll answer that question in 2 seconds. But while I'm thinking of it, there was one other person I knew that sort of didn't follow the same path, but at least started with stand up. And we've interviewed him. I interviewed him not on the show, but in when we used to have a business publication. His name is, I'm going to pronounce as best I can, but Darren Lacroix. And he was a world champion Toastmaster. And then he started performing stand-up comedy in Vegas. I don't think he performed many shows. Like, I want to say, if I was guessing, probably less than 50, I would say. And then he launched teaching other people how to speaking programs. So I don't even know how many corporate talks he did before he actually started teaching people how to speak. But of course, he had that unique positioning of being the world champion of Toastmasters for a specific year after beating 25,000 other people.
Wow.
So, but I don't know, I don't know if you could say he started the stand-up journey because he actually did the Toastmasters thing first. Anyway, so that was, if I'm being full disclosure, he's the only person I know that was close to us in terms of that sort of journey. In terms of what I didn't like about stand-up, the pay was one thing, but I won't say near the end of my comedy, but during the journey, I found a way to get not anywhere near the speaking level of pay, but more pay than I was getting, which was to produce my own shows.
Right.
And if I could convince bars, so instead of the comedy club, which the pay was, like you said, kind of a pittance, if I could convince a comedy club that they should have a show once a week where they bring in comedy, and almost just like being a live act, I became almost their host for a comedy show, then I could actually get paid quite well, or, for comedy, paid comparable to a music gig, let's say, at a local club. So, but the pay was still definitely one of them, if I compared the two. Another big one, though, was it's the thing that I didn't like. And at the same time, it's probably what kept me coming back, which is so strange. But it was the difference between, obviously, a corporate speaking gig where the audience is rooting for you to succeed versus a comedy club gig where alcohol is involved. And if you succeed, that's great. But if you fail, that's still a good show to them. It's still almost like a make me laugh monkey boy. And if you don't, I'll ruin your show.
Yeah. And every audience is different too, right? No matter where you are, like one club will be different than another. Yeah. That also plays into it.
Yeah. So that was probably the big thing, was the unknown, which I kind of relish and probably drove me to do it, but was also the same reason I didn't want to do it full time for the rest of my life.
Right.
It's just that I guess you hit the nail on the head earlier. I wanted to be able to impact people in a positive way. And there's one aspect of comedy where, you're giving people an escape from their day. If you get them laughing, you're maybe taking away the bad of their day and stuff like that. But you're probably not going to be able to move them into action in a way that can transform their life on a regular basis. And speaking offers that. So I didn't like that comedy was limited in what the potential was, I guess.
Right. And that's the very reason why I probably won't go back to it. I like to throw humor into my talks, but I definitely can't see myself going back and doing stand up anytime soon, if ever. So you made the transition, and what was when you started to make the transition, you started to really dive into this passion component, right? Like how you can fuel passion. And I'd like to dive into like that motivation and what propelled you in that direction, what the feedback you've received after shifting to that the life of a speaker. Why is passion such a critical component in your work, and how do you kind of dive deep into it and continue to dive deep into it?
I feel probably, I guess, as far as the reason for the transition is that people kept coming to me and saying, well, first of all, I guess it ties into how I found my passion. And so when I was, I guess, probably mid-20s, I'm going to say that I liked my job. I didn't love it,
right,
but I liked it. And so the passion side is, I wasn't living my passion. And so all of a sudden what happened was that, for me, I guess I was 25-ish and I started performing stand-up. So I'm going back to the stand-up for a sec. And then all of a sudden I discovered the speaking thing that was my passion. So people saw a change in me. And when they saw that change in me, they started asking how. So that was the real reason behind it.
Right.
And so essentially what happened was that I found this passion for myself. And people started saying at work, what happened with you? There seems to be a jump in your step. You seem to have found what you love and a love for what you do. And how did that happen? And how did you get there? So I decided that I wanted to start teaching people and showing people that, because I realized that there were a lot of people I mean, I've heard numbers like only 5% will ever find their passion in their whole life,
Mm-hmm.
which is really sad. But when you hear that, then it makes you, it makes you sad that that's the case, but you want to help people find their passion. So I started getting a lot of people saying, tell me how. And so that's how it tied in, because once you hear people saying, almost like a customer says, we need more of this, or can you offer us this? When you hear it enough times, eventually you go, maybe there's something here. Maybe there's a reason people keep asking me about that. So that's where the passion came from, is that I discovered it midway through, I guess, my first half of my life. And a lot of people are in the same situation. They're saying, well, I'm this age and I still haven't found it. You're somebody else who didn't find it right away or wasn't born with it. Teach me how. So that's sort of a long answer, but that was really how it all started.
What's one of the things that people overlook when they're trying to find their passion? They get kind of stuck in the weeds, and they like, it's maybe a rather unconventional way that you can help them find and foster their passion.
So, I mean, I take people through an exercise, and really what it comes down to is getting people to ask themselves, what is it that you would continue to do? That, what is it that you do as a pastime or part-time, and you would continue to do if you basically won the lottery, or if money was an issue for whatever reason. What is that thing you continue to do? So I get them to start thinking and writing down, what are those things? What is the thing that you think you'd be good at doing, even if you haven't tried it yet? What is the thing that when you've done it in the past, or you think about doing it, time sort of stands still, you don't watch the clock? And so if you start asking yourself questions like that, or what is it when you were a child you did when money wasn't an issue? What is it that you maybe did whenever you were on the path that you felt you should be on, and then somebody said, no, you can't do that, you can't go to clown college? Or, speaking earlier, we were talking about sketch or whatever, you can't go to Second City or Humber College, you got to get a real job. So if you go to that intersection of where people pushed you off your path, you'll probably find some hints towards your passion. So to answer your question in a short answer, that's really it. I get people to go through an exercise where they're asking themselves those type of questions, putting down the answer and building a list, and then to look at that list and say, now, what are the ones you can't live without? What are the ones that you would, you just, if you had them, it didn't have them in your life, it would really bother you? Or if you're not doing it already, what are the ones that you could bring into your life and you think it would make the difference? And then the secondary part is, now, which ones are inside your comfort zones, which ones are out? The ones that are inside your comfort zone, of course, you can take that step right now. The ones that are outside your comfort zone, then maybe that takes a little more practice. Maybe that's the ones where you have to actually put some steps in place and take those baby steps. So, you and I were talking stand-up. Well, not everybody's going to jump on a stand-up stage without taking some baby steps, like maybe trying Toastmasters first, or going to a comedy club and watching, or asking questions of comics. So, I mean, that was sort of another long answer, Mike, but I hope that helps kind of tell you how I sort of start guiding people, at least, to thinking about what my passion could be.
Right. No, definitely. So I want to talk about the idea of people's fears, especially when it relates to communicating. And let's talk about public speaking in general. It's, been widely, reported that the number one fear people have is fear of speaking in public. It's more feared than death. So how do you help somebody who is trying to convey a message, whether it's their passion or whether it's just a message that they want to deliver, either to a large group or just amongst, a small group of colleagues, and get more comfortable with that? Do you have some, I know you've got a TED Talk about crushing your fears and expanding your comfort zone, and we'll definitely link to that in the show notes. But I want to get a sense of how you can help people move past that fear of speaking and move more towards a relationship of comfort with that idea.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say there's a couple of different paths in terms of taking action, as you know, from, your time in sketch and being on a stage. I mean, there's nothing quite like getting out there and doing it. So speaking is not one of those things where it's just as simple as, here are some methods for getting on a stage in practicality, and then good luck. I mean, it's one of those things where you actually have to eventually get on a stage. So there's nothing like stage time. So, I mean, what I would say there is, whether, it's a program like ours where we walk you through, or whether it's something like Toastmasters, which I mentioned earlier, which is as affordable as you're ever going to get, whether it's something like Dale Carnegie, which is maybe a little more money, but a little more, let's say inclusive and intensive. But my answer, I'm going to explain that in more detail, but my answer is, first and foremost, you need to get some stage time. So whether, like I say, that's a Toastmasters and you get there in front of a group of say 8 people or 10 people, that you get to witness some people for the very first time just introducing themselves for 2 minutes, and that could be tough for them. And you're sitting there as a guest and you don't do anything yet, but maybe by the 3rd week you actually decide to introduce yourself and you kind of baby step your way in. I think people need to be doing that while they're learning the rest. So then to answer the second question, how does a person get into it? I think and feel that the biggest fear for most people is the unknown. So even more than the fear of the failure, it's the I don't know what's going to happen. So when you think about stand up, my fear was what's going to happen when I get on that stage. And I realized that, the mic's not going to come on, whatever it might be. But you have a fear of the what if, what could happen. And so you start then basically perceiving all the what ifs. So what I take people through is, first of all, they need to get the comfort on the stage, as I mentioned. And that could be actually also, we have a thing set up so that when we do our speaking program Q&As and people record videos, and so we get them to submit those things. And the Q&A, it's like everybody in the program gets to be on a call with each other, and they're articulating and speaking. And some of them will tell me that was their first time ever speaking in front of somebody. Then we'll bring them onto our show. You mentioned our show earlier. And that, for some people, like my first time on a radio show, I was covered in sweat, even though nobody could see me. And so what I'm getting out of all this, and it relates back to my talk you mentioned, is you need to take baby steps. I think for most people, if you're starting with feeling this fear is greater than death, so Jerry Seinfeld's made the joke that means if you're at a funeral in relation to public speaking, you'd rather be in the casket than having to do the eulogy. So if that's the case for most people, then you need to baby step your way in. You're not going to be able to just do what I did and fall onto the stage and then hope for the best. And so you have to figure out what are those baby steps. So what in our program, we take them through, like I said, getting to be on a speaking Q&A where they're actually talking to other people. And now with Facebook Live, taken through something like that. So these are almost, for some people, these are like speaking moments where it would happen to walk on the stage. And then we'll encourage them to find a local Rotary or Toastmaster and sort of cut their teeth there as well. But it really comes down to doing it in small scale and baby steps and not expecting that you're going to jump in head first. And so that's one side, because if you, and you probably know this, especially on the productivity side, if you carve your whatever that goal is into smaller chunks, and then you list them as baby steps or baby goals, and then you reward yourself after you take each one, you're going to start to gain confidence that you can do the big one, which in this case, what we're talking about is being on the stage in front of a large audience. So if you can do them, like get in a Toastmasters group and do a talk in front of 3 people, and it's only your introduction, which lasts 2 minutes, and then you reward yourself afterward, that's going to give you the confidence to take the next step. And it's not going to seem like such a big step if you've taken 10 baby steps to reach that big one, rather than trying to take one big giant step. So first of all, I'd say take baby steps. Then I would say don't try to necessarily do it alone. Use a buddy system if you have to. So just like people working out, they have a better chance of being successful getting to the gym and doing workouts if they're with a buddy. Find a buddy that wants to conquer a fear of speaking and actually go with them and have an accountability partner. Maybe you go to Toastmasters together. Maybe you're in our program, you do a Facebook Live together. So basically get that confidence for somebody else that you know that you're not going to fall alone like you have to in a stand-up comedy setting where it's just you and a mic.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to fall alone. You actually have somebody to help support you. So those would be the kind of the 2 things I would say to help a person ease their way in, because if it is a big fear and their number one fear, they're not probably going to be able to jump right in cold and conquer it first thing.
And, I think the advice you're offering doesn't just hold true for public speaking. It's for really anything. Like you said, productivity, you break it down to smaller steps, and then you have somebody that you kind of involve somebody. You have an accountability partner, someone that you can lean in and talk to. I think that applies to more than just speaking as well, which is great. Now let's talk about your program really quickly, because you mentioned your program, and I'm sure my listeners are interested in hearing a little bit about that, especially those that are interested in becoming speakers or just wanting to explore and go down that path a little bit. Can you dive into that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And as you know, from being in the speaking field, there's so much to it. And that's why, I'm even careful when I'm sort of giving the advice on, let's say, how to conquer the fear, because it's such a big thing. And there's so many little elements that can go into it. And so those little nuances, those little things that most people maybe don't learn when they launch a speaking career on their own for years and years, what we're trying to do is teach them that right from the jump, maybe help them avoid a lot of the bad habits that even I took on when I first started. So how we structured it is it's a 90-day program, and it's essentially what we do is once a week we release a video training, and so the first month is dedicated to let's say a theme, and that theme is the process. So it's basically how do you launch as a speaker and have a process that helps you launch. The secondary part is the promotion and positioning. So how do you actually position yourself both as a speaker and as an expert in your field? And then the third part is profit. How do you actually earn some money from this business? And so that's how we break it down. But outside of that, within our actual, we have a social media community. So on Facebook, we also have the actual website portal. And on the website portal, in addition to the weekly video training, what we also do is we actually have 12. This last time around, we had 12 experts, and we're talking everybody from Tom Ziegler, so the son of Zig Ziglar. They have their own speaking program. Well, we have Tom sharing what he's learned over the years, helping facilitate the Ziegler speaking program. We have Judy Carter talking about comedy. She wrote the Comedy Bible, which is the book that Oprah brought her on the show, talking about how do you deliver with humor. So we have Judy revealing how to deliver with humor. We have an Olympic gold medalist talking about how she wanted to be a speaker who would just happen to have gold medals instead of being a gold medalist who actually gets paid to show up just because she has gold medals. And how hard that was for her to make that transition. So we have these experts that are sharing weekly as well. And then in addition to that, to make it a little more immersive, we have homework at each stage. And we have one of the things I love too is like we have one tonight, a speaking program Q&A. So this is where we have people on a call and they're going to essentially ask questions about, here's what I've run into since the last time, here's what I want help with. And what's really cool is other people in the program sometimes will actually offer their insight because they have maybe a unique perspective. It's not just a Q&A with me, it's actually Q&A with all of us. And so we have that component. And so it's really just, we're adding stuff that we feel as a speaker, you need this part of your journey and you need help in this area. And here's a new thing that just came up, so let's incorporate it in. And the new question I'm getting by everybody is, how do I get a TED Talk? So of course, that's a new part of the program. This upcoming time is putting in, what does it take to deliver a TED Talk? How do you actually even get one? What's involved in it? What's the feeling of delivering one? How can you position it later on to help your career? So it's all that kind of stuff. So basically I look at it like it's a speaking program 101 that teaches you how to do everything from the very first day you decide I want to get into the speaking business to now I'm on the speaking circuit, but I'm not getting paid what I'm worth. So how do I take it to the next level?
Where can people learn more about the program?
So the website is pretty easy. It's thespeakingprogram.com.
Awesome. Before I let you go, I have one more question, and I want people to be able to leave here today with one action item they can do to kind of fuel their passion, to move things forward. So if you could give one baby step, I guess is the best way to put it, that people can do today as soon as they stop listening to this episode, as to how they can fuel their passion and kind of propel it forward, what would you give them?
Well, it's not, and I don't want it to be like, let's say, one of those things where it's an easy answer. Like I don't want to, just be a cop-out answer and say, well, go back to this. But I have to say, probably, if I'm thinking about what is the step they could take, what is the step I wish I knew whenever I was saying, where is my passion? How come I can't find it? I would say I told you earlier, the process that I take people through, I would ask them to start that process. So to take a pen and paper. I mean, they can obviously, a listener can, sit down with a laptop or a phone or whatever they want to do. But I like pen and paper. I'm old school, but take a pen and paper or whatever that means to you or looks like to you. And what I say, sit down and start asking yourself those questions. What is it that you would do if you money was an issue? What is it that you think you'd love to do? What is it you're good at? What is it that people say you should be doing this? Just sit down and actually maybe spend a half hour with yourself making that list. And then, order the list and say, what is the one that I could try first? Like, let's say you come up with 6 things. Then I would say, what is the one I think? What is the one that gets me most excited? What is the one that is inside my comfort zone so I can start it today? I would say, because you want to obviously take action. You don't want to take the hardest one on the list that you're terrified of, like comedy, let's say.
Yeah.
If that was your list, you don't want to take that one first. Get the easy one, the one that doesn't seem like it's massive. And then go one step further. Let's say that one that doesn't seem like it's massive for you. I'm just saying, kind of use this as an example. Let's say you want to be a photographer, and let's say that's one you wrote on your list. Then, the massive step might be to go out for 3 hours taking pictures of birds. But or whatever that is that you like taking pictures of. But if you've never done it before, that might be a little intense. So maybe, just maybe, it involves going to a Staples or a box store and asking about cameras and learning a little bit about cameras. Maybe it means signing up for a photography course and taking that first step. So the first part I would say is to spend some time with the list, figure out what it is you think you might love to do, and then go into those areas and say, what is a baby step, going back to your point, that I can take right now that'll start this journey? So that could be, like I said, looking up local courses that, let's say if it was in photography or whatever the subject is, reaching out and maybe just signing up for that program. That could be your step starting now.
And make sure when you take that time to set aside, I'll just add to this, that you put your phone as far away from you as possible. Like turn it off, like no notifications, none of that. Be you with yourself. That way you're not distracted, so you can focus intently on this. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the first time I did it, we're going back 15 years, 16 years, which is not that long ago, but really we weren't using phones like we are now.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't have those disruptions. I didn't see my phone as something that, I couldn't be separated from. So I would say if I would have had the phone buzzing and ringing, or even email notifications or anything interrupting that process, it would have either taken longer, or I might have tapped out and just said, this isn't working. So I would agree completely. Just like if you were going to write a book, you really should find a room where nothing else is going on, or maybe even go to a cottage for a week. Whatever that means to you, I think you do have to be at one with what you're writing down and be there in the moment. I mean, if this is something as big as your passion, when I mentioned I've heard that only 5% find it their whole life, and yet the people that find it, as you and I both know, are the people that achieve at the highest levels. If it's that important, then I have to think that it's also that important to move your phone away from it. And it also should be doable to move your phone away from it so that it doesn't become the distraction.
That was quite the jam-packed episode. Thanks to Corey for joining me both back then and, of course, very recently. You can check out all of the relevant show notes and so on and so forth at productivityist.com/podcast533. You can also go to mikevardy.com/podcast533 as well. And that way you can check out all of the things that were discussed then and were discussed again just recently with the launch of his book. One way to support the show is, of course, to check out the sponsors that you heard during our conversation, this really long conversation today. You can go to productivityist.com/podcast sponsors or mikevardy.com/podcast sponsors to check out those sponsors. And if any of them interest you, click on the link. That way they know that we sent you, and it is a way to support the show. Another way to support the show, and also to make it easier to check out the sponsors, is to subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts, because there's a link in there to check out the sponsors, as well as all of the relevant links you would hear during every episode. Another thing that is beneficial by subscribing to the show is that you can easily search through the archives and find other episodes that might interest you, including episodes that we occasionally bring back as vault episodes, like this one was 50% or more of. And also, that way you won't miss a single episode of what. Another thing subscribing does is make sure that you don't miss. Another thing, when you subscribe to the show, you don't miss an episode of the show, and there's plenty more to come. We've got 530 plus episodes already, and there's many more to come. That's it for this episode of A Productive Conversation. Thanks so much for taking the time to join me. And until next time, I'm Mike Vardy, the host of A Productive Conversation, reminding you to stop doing productive and start being productive. See you later.